disappointments, victories, the Greece games in '04. I don't have any regrets. The trials to make it, it's like before that day, I made sure I did everything right. God bless me, this is it. I've given you all the glory through this whole journey. I knew he was gonna show up and just blow me just, around the track. I get in the blocks and the gun sound, pop. I'm in the race, I'm in it. I'm thinking to myself, I'm waiting for God to feel it, to feel that power. And I never felt it. The next thing I know, I crossed the line in 6th place, and I looked at my time. I was off. I felt like God let me down. I was like, I did all this for you. Why couldn't you give me what I wanted? I came home and I just went through the most difficult moment in my life. I went through depression, and that's when I had to learn to really trust God. My pastor came to me and asked me if I would lead the whole youth department at our church.
3, 2, 1.
I was like, wow, Lord, that's you. This is one of his plans. If I hadn't made it that day, I wouldn't be doing this now.
You worked really hard to prepare for something very special, and kind of at the end of it, you felt like it didn't meet your expectations. Has anybody in here ever done that? You've ever experienced that? All right, the rest of you can hold your hand up later. But here's the thing. I know that most of us have been there. Most of us have walked through some season in our life where we really sensed this is God's plan, this is God's direction, this is His path that He has, and we pursue it, and we go after it, and we work hard, and we do as much as we can to honor the calling that we believe God has put in front of us. And as we pursue that, we begin to encounter a problem here, a challenge there, an issue here, an issue there. But we keep pushing through. However, sometimes we get to the end of a path that we thought we were to have a certain result at the end of, and God had something else in store. Think about this young man. His goal was to make the Olympics. Did he make the Olympics? Did you guys watch the video? Okay. Did he make the Olympic team? No. But did something else that God had in store still occur? And I wonder how much of his training, his preparation, his journey fed into his eventual ministry. How much of what he processed and what he went through, and how much of his story became something he could share with students that were in a seat where they were trying to become everything that he had tried to become, yet he saw God's story work out this way in his life, even though he had hoped that it would be this. Well, today as we look at Ezra 6, we're going to see our buddies, these Israelites, God's people, walking through a similar circumstance. And so if you have your Bible, I want to encourage you to pull it out and go to Ezra 6. And as we hang out there, I think we're going to see some things that we can kind of compare not only this young man's story to, but ours, and see where God has us, where God's leading us, and what might possibly be in store. Because I can only imagine when he did not make that Olympic team, did he celebrate? No, he did not say he celebrated anything. But when he found what God had called him to, that story got to be used in, there was an opportunity for celebration there. And that for us is where we're going to eventually connect that today with what we see in Ezra 6. And we're going to see that kind of play out in our lives as well, because sometimes, when we're pursuing what we believe God has called us to, there are challenges that happen along that way. Now, I don't want to overassume that everybody in this room is a believer in Jesus. Because I know from time to time we have people hang out with us that really probably every week who are kind of trying to figure out, do I want to follow this Jesus, or am I kind of digging what I've got going on already? Or maybe we feel like somehow, some way, we feel like God maybe let us down somewhere and we don't see the bigger picture, realizing He has us going through something so He can take us to something else. And maybe you're just in a different place in your walk with Him and you're really not sure exactly how this is going to land on you today. I'm not sure either. I know that I've been walking through it for the past 2 weeks, and it's hit me in a lot of different places. And so for you today, no matter where you are in your journey to know God and to live in Him, today hopefully you can hear what the Israelites had to process. And then we'll show you some other things in the New Testament that some men had to process after they walked through something like, here's the goal, here's the plan. Wait a minute, there's some issues that have come up. There's some problems I've encountered. What do I do now? Can I still celebrate? Is this ending still something I am excited about? And that's something we're going to pursue a little bit today. Would you mind taking a moment just praying with me? Father God, thank you for the chance that we have to get together today and to look in your word and to pursue you and to go hard after you and to discover, God, what it is that you have for us, not just to gain, but to know, to understand, and to live in out of Ezra 6. God, help us to see your plan, your will, and your calling today as we study, learn, and grow together. In Jesus' name, amen. Can we celebrate when things don't seem perfect? Can we be excited and joyful in a time where things look a little bleak? Can we rejoice when life just kind of feels like it's filled with problems? Sometimes I think that's really hard to do, and I think some of you are like, no, we can't. But some of you are like, I don't know, can we? Can we celebrate? Can we get excited? Can we be happy when it feels like there's a lot of things pressing in on us? And I think our culture says, no, you can't. You need to be down. You need to be upset. You need to be, but can there be something different in the midst of our struggle? Can there be a different response? I want us to consider that today as we kind of look at the people of Israel and what they teach us. They teach us to celebrate even in the midst of a confused and broken world in chapter 6 of Ezra. They teach us that. They celebrated the dedication of the temple even though it was not nearly as magnificent as the first temple. We've talked about that in the weeks before. They made offerings for the 12 tribes of Israel, even though 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel had at this time been destroyed. Can we celebrate when life is not perfect, and should we? According to Ezra 6, the answer to that is yes, we can, and yes, we should. Even when things are not as perfect as we had hoped or as we had planned, what is it that God has for that moment as a part of that story that we can still celebrate? I think in our expectations, in our culture, and in our, if you want to call it our version of Christianity, we tend to only celebrate when we consider and feel that everything is good and everything is great and everything is on the upside, but we forget sometimes that there's a celebration of simply the oxygen that just went into my lungs, you know? The opportunity that God has given us for that next step and that next step and that next breath. Sometimes and some days when it's really hard, that's the only thing some of us can celebrate. But there's still something to celebrate. And so we're going to look at some of that today and look at the Israelites, chapter 6 of Ezra. So go there with me if you haven't already, because I want us to see that these guys, over a process of the past 5 chapters, they trusted God. They were obedient to his calling to rebuild this temple, and it leads to a celebration. But along that way, it was not easy. We've just been through 5 chapters of looking at this stuff in this whole book of Ezra. And I just got to point out, I like Jim Markle, but this thing keeps freaking me out. I came in here yesterday just to check on things, make sure the room was okay and good. And somebody put homeboy Jim Markle inside the altar. I was expecting him to be somewhere over here. But when you see somebody peeking out, checking on how things are going, when you turn the light on, things happen in your mind, you know. Get a little nervous. I'm not afraid to admit I was scared, okay? Just going to put that out there. So don't look at that the whole time. But, you know, you feel like somebody's behind you when that's up here. But we're going to keep going into Ezra 6. We've been studying this, and that some of you are like, why is that up there? Well, this has been a part of our series. This was part that we talked about a few weeks ago, as well as this, a version of the altar that we talked about a few weeks ago, as well as this, a listing of those who were qualified to be a part of the building of the temple that we talked about a few weeks ago. And last week, there was a giant ladder here on the stage, and there's a lot of things that we've had up here prop-wise, and I don't bring another prop because I usually, if you've been here with me before, I take up a lot of space, and I'm going to trip over something. So we just pushed all this back. But for us today, as we look at Ezra 6, we get to where we've been traveling to for a while. And if you recall in chapter 5, what happened is there's some tattletales that are wanting to go and to tell King Darius, hey, these Israelites are building this temple, and I don't think they should be. I don't even think they've got permission. So I'm going to make sure that King Darius knows this so that he can put a stop to it, because I don't feel like this is right. I mean, this doesn't look good. So let me make sure Darius knows everything that's happening here so that he can put an end to it. So there's this letter that gets written, and it gets delivered to Darius. And Darius is like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Let me figure out more. Let me do some research on this to see if these Israelites have permission to be doing this. So let me set the stage here. What you have to recall is, as the Israelites called by God to rebuild this temple in order to honor God, in order to be a place of worship for the people of God, they had to go into a place that it had been decimated. It had been destroyed. Where the former temple had stood, it had been taken away from the Israelites and had been completely demolished. And they go into a place where they're not liked, they're virtually hated, and they're starting to rebuild this temple to honor a God that the land around them does not believe in. And so as they're going in to do this, people are looking at them like, I don't know if this is right. I don't know if they should be doing this. I don't even like these guys. So how can I make it hard on them? And even some of the Israelites themselves were scared, were nervous, because people were saying things, and people were being pretty mean about this whole process. And some backed down and like, man, I don't know if I want in on this. But some said, hey, God called us to this. We're going to see this through. And their trust and their obedience, we'll look at today, eventually led to celebration. And so what happens here is this letter gets written to Darius, like I said, and as he gets it, he's like, okay, maybe we need to do some research. Okay, maybe they don't have permission to build this temple in this land that I oversee. And so that's where we find ourselves, chapter 6. So King Darius issued orders that the search be made in the Babylonian archives, which were stored in the treasury, for the permission to build this temple. Okay, so we jump down. Verse 3. In the first year of King Cyrus's reign, a decree was sent out concerning the temple of God at Jerusalem. And it said this: Let the temple be rebuilt on the site where Jews used to offer their sacrifices using the original foundations. Its height will be 90 feet. Its width will be 90 feet. Every 3 layers of specially prepared stones will be topped by a layer of timber. All expenses will be paid by the royal treasury. I'm starting to dig this, all right? What? Are you telling me that this tattletale didn't know any of this, came and said, hey, Darius, they don't need to be doing this. Turns out, one of the previous kings, one of the previous rulers had said, hey, let them do this. And by the way, we're going to pay for it. That doesn't happen, friends. That doesn't happen. I mean, most of us in here, let's just say you want to build a new house. You don't typically have somebody come and say, hey, I'd like to pay for your new house. If you do, give me that person's number, all right? We'll have a convo to see what happens. But what I'm saying is this is unusual. Hey, we're going to build this temple for the Israelites' God out of our treasury. We're going to provide this. And as it keeps going, this is what a previous ruler had said, right? And so Darius is finding this, and he's reading this, and it says in the next verse, furthermore, verse 5, the gold and silver cups which were taken to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar from the temple of God in Jerusalem must be returned to Jerusalem and put back where they belong. Let them be taken back to the temple of God. I mean, this is unheard of. This stuff doesn't just happen. It's like, what? There has to be something bigger going on here. And those of us that know God and know His Word, we know that there is, right? There's something else happening in this story to cause the government to say, hey, let us help out. There's something else happening in the story to say, you mean the stuff that was taken from Jerusalem and that temple wasn't destroyed and redistributed in some other way, but it was saved? There's something else going on here. There's some other piece to this story that God has in store. And so this was read by Darius, and he found this information. And so what we see here, and what we need to look at, as we see the Israelites trusting and obeying and leading to this celebration, we first see this proof that was provided that these guys had permission in this moment to build this temple. There's this proof, there's this backing of the government, there's this backing of the leadership. And like I said a while ago, that doesn't just happen. God convinced, God shared, God created a way for His people when they had no means, they had no standing, they had no proof, he provided a way to have proof for permission. And he did that in a way that was unusual in that day and time, and it would be unusual in our day and time too. But also, not only was proof provided, but then supply was provided for the Jews. They didn't have anything. They had been captives. They didn't have anything. They didn't have tons of money or anything like that to be able to go in there and just build this thing. So not only was proof provided to give them permission, but we also see that supply was provided. If you look with me in verses 6 through 10, so King Darius sent this message. Now, therefore, and he addresses all of the leadership of that area, and then go down to verse 7, to all the leadership in this area, do not disturb the construction of the temple of God. Let it be rebuilt on its original site. Do not hinder the governor of Judah and the elders of the Jews in their work. Boom, that's good stuff. But, next step, verse 8, moreover, I hereby decree that you are to help these elders of the Jews as they rebuild this temple of God. You must pay the full construction cost without delay from my taxes collected in the province west of the Euphrates River, so that the work will not be interrupted. Give the priest in Jerusalem whatever is needed in the way of young bulls, rams, male lambs, for burnt offerings presented to the God of heaven. And without fail, provide them with as much wheat, salt, wine, and olive oil as they need each day. Then they will be able to offer acceptable sacrifices to the God of heaven and pray for the welfare of the king and his sons. I love that he is like, you're coming to me trying to get them to stop. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to research it. Oh, looks like that's already been given permission. Oh, well, hey, here's what we're going to do. They get to keep building. And by the way, you're going to go ahead and help them. You're going to go ahead and you wrote your little letter. Let me get you a letter back. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to help them. And here's how. Guys, that's most kings of this day and time are like, all right, I'll squash that out before it becomes something I have to deal with, you know. I'll take them out so I don't have to worry about them and still just be king and do my thing. But instead, God somehow convinced Darius and other leaders to just say, you know what? We're going to help this happen. God made a way when there didn't seem to be a way. The Israelites didn't have the resources. They didn't have the opportunity, but God said, hey, here's the deal. I'm going to work this out so that you can rebuild this, my people, so that people can see who I am and who I've made you to be. And in that process, what we continue to see in these verses that follow is not only did they have proof, supply, but God worked out a way for them to have protection. Look at verses 11 and 12. Those who violate this decree in any way will have a beam pulled from their own house. I love it. He's making like, listen, if you cause any trouble, we're taking your house down, all right? What I'm saying is I need y'all to help, and if you're not going to help, we're taking stuff from your house, and you're helping that way. That's pretty rough stuff. That's pretty to the point. And their house will be reduced to a pile of rubble if they stand in the way. Verse 12. May the God who has chosen the city of Jerusalem as a place to honor his name destroy any king or nation that violates this command and destroys this temple. I, Darius, have issued this decree. Let it be obeyed with all diligence. Whoa, that's huge. There's a major penalty for not helping God's people in this case. This is a really interesting thing to look at if you really consider how unliked the Israelites were at this point in time. And there was a small remnant of them. There really wasn't a ton of them. And they were here ready and hoping to fulfill this thing that they knew God had called them to in the rebuilding of this temple, but they didn't have the resources. They weren't really welcome in the area. And it took God working all of this out through the leadership that was in place in order for them to honor him. And he made a way. And he made it happen. Because what we see is we see the success in verses 13 through 15. Take a look at that with me. The governors and everybody of that followed through. And in verse 14 it says, so the Jewish elders continued their work, and they were greatly encouraged by the preaching of the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, son of Iddo. The temple was finally finished, as had been commanded by the God of Israel and decreed by Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, the kings of Persia. The temple was completed during the 6th year of King Darius' reign. The temple of God was then dedicated with great joy by the people of Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the people who had returned from exile. During the dedication ceremony for the temple of God, 100 young bulls, 200 rams, 400 male lambs were sacrificed, and 12 male goats were presented as a sin offering for the 12 tribes of Israel. Then the priests and the Levites were divided into their various divisions to serve at the temple of God in Jerusalem as prescribed in the book of Moses. Y'all, this is a big deal. It's like this reinstatement of this people of God that had been exiled, that had been stuck, that had been depleted, that had been beat down, and all of a sudden God said, hey, we're gonna come back, y'all. You're my people. I told you I would take care of you, and here's what we're gonna do. So people will know my name and know that you are my people. And he found a way, figured out a way, processed a way for them to come to this place of completion. And this place of completion took a lot of years. There's a lot of time. There's a lot of hard things that happened in the middle of it. And we were looking at this video of this young man that trained for this opportunity to go to the Olympics. He worked hard. And there were probably lots of times where he questioned, man, should I even be doing this? Is this even going to work out? Especially on race day when he went and he didn't finish in a place where he had hoped that he would finish. And he thought that it was just over, that it was just done. But God had something else in store. The Israelites walked through that because, like I told you, there were people that were hating them. People were not liking them. People were being mean to them. People were taking things from them. I mean, you know, you might show up to work the next day and some of your tools are missing and you can't do anything because people are trying to stick it to you. They're trying to put you down. And these guys walked through that and said, God called us to this. Some have walked away, but let's be faithful. Let's trust. Let's be obedient. And it led to completion. And it led to a celebration. Can we celebrate when life is not perfect? Look at how they celebrated. The Passover celebration. Look in verses 19 and following with me. If you see right there, the returned exiles celebrated the Passover. The priests, the Levites purified themselves. Now you got to remember, this is like the biggest deal to the Israelites, Passover. This is their party of parties, all right? This is the thing that they love because it reminds them of God's deliverance. It reminds them of God's presence with them. It reminds them, here is what God has done. He has been faithful and He is going to be able to see us through. And that's what the Passover for them was all about. And so they celebrated that. And so look at it there with me. They slaughtered the Passover lamb for all the returned exiles, for their fellow priests and for themselves. The Passover meal was eaten by the people of Israel who had returned from exile and by the others in the land who had turned from their immoral customs to worship the Lord, the God of Israel. So people are coming back to God through this process when they're seeing cool things happen that God is doing. In verse 22, then they celebrated the festival of unleavened bread for 7 days, and there was great joy throughout the land because the Lord had caused the king of Assyria to be favorable to them, so that he helped them to rebuild the temple of God, the God of Israel. What an appropriate way to celebrate the completion of their deliverance from the Babylonians, who had destroyed the temple in 587 BC. It's no wonder that they celebrated with joy, not only because of God's historical deliverance, but also because of what it says in verse 22. The Lord made them joyful and turned the heart of the king of Assyria toward them to strengthen their hands in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel. Proverbs 13:19 talks about this kind of stuff. When there's this really great thing that you're looking forward to, this really big thing that you're hoping for, it is pleasant to see dreams come true. Now, guys, this little celebration, this Passover, some of you are like, yeah, it's the Passover. You don't understand. This was a big deal. The completion of this temple was the party of parties. The biggest thing that you could celebrate in this moment and the biggest way that you could celebrate. And they were given it all. Everything that they had, because like I already told you, they really didn't have much. And so everything that they had been given to them, and who gave it to them? The people in the area and the government. And what did they do with everything that was given to them? They sacrificed it. They gave it all. Because God had provided, they returned it all. Sometimes in this midst of this whole story, though, stuff seemed pretty difficult. Stuff seemed like it wasn't going to work out. Stuff seemed like it was just going to have to end. But some remained faithful. They trusted they were obedient, and they were able to celebrate. So can we celebrate when life is not perfect? Can we celebrate? Think about these guys. The temple was smaller than the previous temple. It wasn't as ornate. It wasn't as beautiful. So some could have said, like they did in previous chapters, it's not really that great. It's okay. This temple, that temple, I don't know. This one's okay. But he doesn't say anything about that. It says how joy-filled they were because of this accomplishment of the God calling and the completion of the God plan that they found themselves in the midst of. So can we celebrate when things are not perfect? Can we rejoice even when life is filled with problems? The people of Israel, like I said before, teach us to celebrate even in the midst of a confused and broken world. They celebrated the dedication of the temple even though it was not nearly as magnificent as the first. They made offerings, like I said a while ago, for the 12 tribes of Israel, even though 10 of those tribes had been destroyed. They celebrated in the biggest way they could. They were happy because of what God had brought them to in the midst of trouble. So can we celebrate when life is not perfect? And should we? According to Ezra 6, yes. Yes, we should celebrate when things are hard and when problems occur. Like the video that we watched of the young man at the beginning. Did he eventually have a reason to celebrate? Yeah. But he had to see that through. The Israelites in the middle of building that temple. Man, are we ever going to finish this? Are we ever going to get to the point to where we really want to be? Man, I don't know. This is kind of hard. Man, we finished it, but it doesn't look like I really wanted it to. It's not as perfect as I'd hoped that it would be, but they celebrated. Maybe you're walking through a stage of your life right now that doesn't look like you wanted it to look. Maybe you're dealing with a part of your journey that isn't as you expected it to be. Can you still celebrate in that? Can we still find joy in that? Culturally, I think we would be told no. But in Christ, the answer is yes. Because there is this big story that is being written. We only see parts of it. God's got this whole thing under His sovereignty and His power. Just like He had the Israelite situation under His guidance, and He found a way and He made a way and they were able to celebrate, He has our lives in that same place. He has you and He has me in that same place. In our struggle, God sees opportunity and potential. In the Israelite struggle, God saw opportunity and potential. In ours, He sees opportunity and potential. And we will see it as well if we would trust and be obedient to God in our lives. Now, like I said, not everybody in here is a solid follower of Jesus, and I understand that. Some of you, you're like, man, I hadn't really talked to God about anything lately, except maybe that the Cowboys would be a little bit better, you know? Some of you have offered that prayer. Some of you are like, oh, I need to, you know? If you're a praying person, that'd be great. God doesn't care a whole lot about sports, but He cares about what you care about. So process that as you will. However, some of you, your prayer life this morning was, got to pray for my kids. Honestly, Father, they're not where I'd hoped that they would be. God, I pray for my relationship with my children because it's not where I had hoped it would be. Father, I'm coming to you because I know that my marriage is not where it should be. But God, I'm praising you because I know that you can help. God, I'm celebrating in you because I know that you have more and you're writing this story. I mean, there are things in our lives that some of us today can easily celebrate. But for some of us, there's a lot of rough stuff going on underneath the surface, and we're maybe finding it a little bit difficult to celebrate today. Even though it's Mother's Day, for some of us in this space, it's a sad day for us because we have a mom who is gone now, and we don't get to celebrate with her today. For some of us, it's a rough day because you're a mom and your children made you like burned bacon this morning for breakfast in bed, and there's nothing worse than breakfast in bed with burned bacon. I mean, let's just be honest. Maybe burned sausage, right? The only other thing. Your children tried to serve you well, and your morning as a mom didn't turn out like you thought it would because your 24-year-old made you a handcrafted thing for your mother. Some of y'all, that happened, right? So you're like, that's true. They can buy stuff. They have a job. Yeah, I know. It was sweet when they were 4, but now, let's switch this up. Maybe things didn't turn out for you as you had possibly hoped. Maybe your kids and their lives, or your marriage, or maybe you're a lady in this room, and honestly, Mother's Day is difficult for you because that's not something that God had for you. And that can be hard for many. And so you come to a Mother's Day and you're like, man, my plans just did not play out. But what are God's plans? What does He have in store? Where you see no way, He's got a way. Where you see no reason to celebrate, He wants to show you how to celebrate. Where your struggle is and where your problem is, He wants to show you, hey, this is happening so that this can happen. The Israelites had to walk through that. And it was hard and it was difficult, and it is for you and me. When I think about this and I think about Mother's Day and I think about how we're kind of looking at some of the scripture today, I'm reminded when I was little, smaller, I was never a slim, small child, so I came out cute and pudgy, pretty much stayed that way. Just kind of got taller. Well, when I was younger, let's just say I gave my mom a little bit of trouble from time to time. Kind of got in trouble a little bit with her sometimes, and she would tell me to do something, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. Why would I ever want to do that? Because as a little boy growing up in West Texas, one of our common things was to run around without a shirt on. It's just what you do. I'm probably the reason they had those signs on doors, no shirt, no shoes, no service, right? I'm one of those kids. So we would be running around having a good time, and it'd be time to go somewhere. My mom wanted me to go with her. Let me put a shirt on. My answer typically was, why? What do you think her answer was? Because I said so. Everybody knows that answer. It's like in the mom book, right? Line 1. Always say, because I said so. Mom always said, because I said so. Eat your vegetables. Why? Because I said so. My mom didn't say it like that, but I'm making you think she did. Put a shirt on late. Why? Because I said so. Stop punching your sister. Why? Because I said so. Let me tell you, when Mama said so, we did so. You know what I'm saying? Most of y'all in here are like, yeah. Some of you are trying not to make eye contact with your mom in the room right now. You're like, yeah, that's right. Because Mom said so. Why did the Israelites build the temple? Because God said so. But God, why? I don't know that we can do this. I don't know that we can get this to happen. Listen, I said to do it. I'm going to make a way. But are you sure, God? Because nobody around here really likes us. This is a hard place for us to be. Hey, I said so just go ahead. I will make a way. It reminds me of a passage that I noticed in the Gospels this past week as I was prepping for this. Think about my mom doing stuff because she said so, and I think about us doing stuff because God said so. The trust, the obedience leads to celebration. If you've still got your Bible in your lap, I want to invite you to turn to Luke chapter 5 with me. In Luke chapter 5, what we see is another opportunity for someone, some people, some group of folks to say, I'm trusting, I'm being obedient, and it leads to celebration. Luke 5, 4 through 11. I know you're like, Lee, that's a hard link between Ezra and Luke. You know what? Same God of the Israelites that told them to rebuild the temple is the same God that we're going to look at right here. And he's the same God that's in the room with us today, the same one who leads and loves, and the same one that we worship in this moment. His consistency is proven from Ezra to Luke to whatever book you want to name in Scripture. Same God is faithful to be who he is and showing people that along the path. Luke 5, 4 through 11. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, now go out where it's deeper and then let down your nets to catch some fish. What you got to remember here is this. Simon Peter and his other fisherman buddies have been out fishing all night long. Because they're fishermen. That's what they do. They fish. But Jesus is a carpenter. And he's the one they're having this conversation with. His dad was a carpenter. And I'm sure that these guys, Simon Peter's probably on the boat, coming in from a long night of fishing and catching nothing. And then you got Jesus here, and he's like, hey, go out deeper. I'll bet you catch something out there. Simon Peter's probably thinking, bro, we've been out all night. Well, you don't understand, Mr. Carpenter fella, is that we're fishermen, and the fish come to the surface at night because when the water cools down, they come, and here's how it works. Won't you go build a table or something, you know? Don't be telling us how to do our job. For a lot of us, we have that type of sometimes pushback when God calls us to something. But look at how Simon Peter, if you didn't already look, responds. After Jesus said, now go out where it's deeper, let down your nets to catch some fish. Master, Simon replied, we worked hard all last night, didn't catch a thing. But if you say so, I'll let down the nets again. And this time, their nets were so full of fish, they began to tear. A shout for help brought their partners in the other boat, and soon both boats were filled with fish and were on the verge of sinking. And y'all, that's a lot of fish. When you get enough fish on your boat that your boat's about to go down, none of you men in this room have ever done this, all right? Talk about your little fishing escapades. This is the real stuff. When Simon Peter realized what had happened, he fell to his knees before Jesus and said, Lord, please leave me. I'm such a sinful man. For he was awestruck by the number of fish they had caught, as were all those that were with him. And his partners, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, were also amazed. Jesus replied to Simon, hey, don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be fishing for people. And as soon as they landed, they left everything and followed Jesus. There was a struggle that these guys encountered. They didn't catch any fish all night long. Jesus shows up and says, hey, do this. Why, Jesus? Because I said so. Because you say so, I will. God, you mean that we're supposed to build this temple here where nobody likes us? Where people are pretty much hating on us? Are you sure this is going to be okay? Yeah, just go ahead. It'll be fine because I say so. Now, Jesus, are you sure? We'll go out to the deep because you say so. I don't think this is going to work. I don't think it's going to happen. We didn't catch anything all night. There's probably not even any fish left in here. But because you say so, we'll go out here and look at what he did. God, this plan that you've been kind of showing me for my life, I'm not so sure about it. Why should I even keep pursuing this or even keep pursuing you? Because I said so. I've got another part of your story that I want to unfold. This problem, this situation, this circumstance that you're dealing with today is so that I can show you this tomorrow. And we can celebrate together my goodness, and others can see the greatness of God through our lives. This is what he did with the Israelites. This is what he did with Simon Peter. And it's what he does in us. In our struggle, we should remember there is always more going on than meets the eye. In our struggle, we should remember there's always more going on than meets the eye. In our struggle, we should remember there is always more going on. Behind the scenes, God has a plan, has a call, has a design that we don't always get to see until we see it happen. In our struggle, we should remember the prize of any race is what makes it worth it. There's a lot of challenges in a race and in a process of living a life that many of us are called to as followers of Jesus. It sometimes is hard and sometimes there's problems, but there is a prize that awaits, and it's the glory of God showing up at the right moment, at the right time, to where we get to say, whoa, did you see what God just did? This is my story. I was here, and look where he has me now. It's all because of him and his glory. The prize of any race is what makes it worth it. And finishing any race requires trust and obedience, and it leads to celebration. Trust and obedience lead to celebration. Jesus sees something that we don't see. God saw something for the Israelites that they didn't even understand, and he's like, I'm going to raise you up, and there's not many of you, but you're going to build this temple, and I'm going to make it to where even though you don't have the funds, you don't have the stuff, I'm going to make sure it happens so that you can do this and point to me. And when you point to me, they will all see. Simon Peter, same situation. Because you say so, okay. Jesus sees something that we don't see. What about in your heart and in your life? Or whatever it is that you're dealing with today. Maybe you're a mom here and something's going on in your family's life, your kid's life, and it's hard to deal with right now. Why, God? Why, God? Because I say so. And hang on. Because I've got something else coming. Maybe in your own heart, in your own life, just for you. Maybe your marriage, maybe your business, maybe your job. God, I don't understand this. Why? Because I said so. Watch. Hang in there. Trust me. Be obedient. Trust, obedience, and celebration. What do you need to trust Him for today? What do you personally need to trust Him for today? A lot of times we come to church and we're like, that was a great lesson. I'm going home. What do you need to trust Him for today? What do you need to be obedient in today? And one of the ones that we overlook a lot is, what do you need to celebrate today? What do you need to celebrate that God has done? Or do you just walk right past those cool things that God does in your life and say, well, that was neat, and move on? What do you need to trust Him for today? What do you need to be obedient in? And what do you need to celebrate?
I can only imagine